Thousands have been evacuated from the border areas near Ukraine's Kharkiv, as Russia claims it has captured 4 more villages in the country's northeast. This is in addition to the 5 villages that Russia claimed to have captured on Saturday in Kharkiv. According to the Kharkiv governor, over 4,000 people have been evacuated and several have been killed, as Russian troops reported gains on the battlefield. The region has come under 32 drone strikes in the past 24 hours. Ukraine says its troops are holding out against further Russian advances. However, the situation has deteriorated significantly. Ukrainian forces continue to be outnumbered in infantry, armory, and ammunition on the ground.
Today, the focus is primarily on the front line, on the situation in our areas where there is the highest risk of Russian offensive. Our defensive operations continue in the Kharkiv.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claims that Ukrainian troops have been carrying out counterattacks in the border villages, thwarting Russian offensive plans, which is now their #1 priority.
Last month, President Vladimir Putin suggested establishing a buffer zone inside Ukrainian territory due to the attacks on Belgorod. The Russian Defense Ministry said on Sunday it destroyed 2 Soviet-era conventional ballistic missiles launched overnight over the Belgorod region. A Ukrainian drone attack also hit a refinery in Russia's Vrad region, causing a fire at the complex.
In the Russian city of Belgorod, a Ukrainian missile hit a multi-story structure, taking down a whole section of the building. The attack killed at least 7 and injured over 17. Moscow described the incident as a terrorist attack on residential areas. The attack was carried out using Torch, Ku Vampire, and Ala missiles, and ETS. The city has been subjected to massive Ukrainian shelling, and this, according to officials. Peter Kosnick is a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University, and is now joining us from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Professor. We have seen Russia taking advancements in the war. What does this say about the war in your view? What direction will the war take?
It's a very difficult position now, both in terms of manpower and in terms of weaponry. Russia is taking advantage of that. They had been moving in the east and the south, now they've added this offensive in the north. And so the Ukrainian lines were already stretched very thin. Russia was making incremental gains in the south and the east. Now Ukraine is forced to move many of those troops to protect in the north around Kyiv, which weakens them further in the south and the east. Russia is exploiting their advantages. They have more artillery ammunition, more weaponry, and much more soldiers right now. So Ukraine has passed new legislation that allows them to draft more Ukrainian citizens, but that doesn't go into effect for another week, and that will require months of training. So Ukraine is going to be in a weakened position for quite some time. Nobody has any optimistic assessment of anything that would happen.
There are 2 theories behind this offensive toward Kharkiv.
One is to push the Ukrainians 6 miles back to create a buffer zone so that Ukraine will not be able to hit Belgrade and other areas inside of Russia. So that's one theory, just to create a buffer zone. Other people think that Russia is actually planning to try to seize Kharkiv. Kharkiv is Ukraine's 2nd biggest city. Before the war, it had a population of 1.3 million people. So that would be very, very difficult. But given the state of conditions in Ukraine right now, it might not be impossible. That would be a major victory for Russia if it can seize Kharkiv. But even if it can push to create a 6-mile buffer zone, which seems much more feasible, that would also protect those cities. Towns like Belgrade inside of Russia. Professor, let's talk about that $61 billion that was passed. Most of that gets spent in the United States by America's munitions makers, and it takes time to do that. Biden has just announced a $400 million military aid package, and that's going to be based on his presidential drawdown authority. So, they will take $400 million worth of weapons from the US arsenal and deliver those much more quickly. And that's a variety of offensive and defensive weapons that Ukraine can use, but it's going to take time. Could take weeks, months, even longer to build the weapons to ship over to Ukraine. Now, the Europeans have been providing some, but they're also behind their promises. The other concerning thing that we shouldn't lose track of is that Macron has been talking about sending French and other European ground troops to support the Ukrainians. We also think that with the F-16S and other advanced weaponry arriving, it's possible that NATO forces will be there to help target and possibly to help use those weapons. All of these are a serious escalation. Putin has been making a lot of saber rattling about tactical nuclear weapons.
Now, so I don't want this to escalate to a much bigger war, and that's also possible. The more desperate Ukraine becomes, the more possibility that this situation escalates into potentially World War III, and that's what we especially have to make sure it's prevent. All right, we're out of time now, Professor. Thank you very much for talking to us. I've been talking to Peter Kosnick, who's a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. Professor, thank you once again.
Thank you.